I appreciate the kindness, Deputy Speaker. Thank you so much. And I am delighted to be able to speak tonight on this bill on the Public Service Amendment Bill of 2023 before the House of Representatives this evening. It's a bill that makes amendments to the Public Service Act and is a really key part of the Albanese Labor government's reforms to the Australian public service and the big reform agenda that we have for the public service. Of course, the Australian public service is vital to the running of our country, and I am especially grateful to all public service sector employees for the work that they do. There are literally millions of Australians that rely on the public service to ensure that their lives are the very best they can be. And they are delivering important programs in every city, every town, every region across Australia. It's an enormous task. And hundreds of, indeed thousands of Novocastrians would interact with the APS each and every day, speaking to Centrelink officers on the phone or visiting in the office, receiving subsidised medicines through the PBS, applying for passports, going into the Australian Tax Office, Departments of Veterans Affairs, the NDIS. Each and every one of these agencies are employing bodies for exceptional Australian public servants. And the APS is keeping our borders safe. In my port city of Newcastle, for example, the APS officers at Border Force, they're being very vigilant, monitoring ships coming in and out of the port of Newcastle, the busiest port on the eastern seaboard of Australia. 23 ship movements each and every day, at least. There's a lot to keep an eye on there. And the veteran community in not just my electorate of Newcastle, but for my neighbouring electorates of Hunter, Shortland and Patterson, all of their veterans are relying on the Department of Veterans Affairs office, which is located next door to my office in Newcastle, as is the Veterans Counselling Service, Open Arms, that is next door. All of these are people dedicated to the delivery of really high-quality programs and services to our communities. So every single one of the 151 members in this House is, I'm sure, deeply indebted to the service that is provided by Australian public servants. My electorate knows too well just how important the public sector is. And we also know how decimated they became under the former government, who reduced capability, who outsourced billions of dollars of work to consultants and contractors, and that was deeply damaging for our Australian public service. It left the staff also in electorate offices like mine, but I've got to say I'm sure even members opposite would have to now attest to the fact that it left electorate officers everywhere in this country having to really step up and fill the gaps in services that were not being delivered, or indeed were met with there was such a high level of unmet need because of the lack of staff in some of the government agencies around the country. So people were really struggling in Newcastle to get the responses that they needed and deserved from a number of government agencies over the course of the last decade. And that put a lot of pressure on staffs in electorate offices to try and get the sort of response you need from Centrelink when you're seeking an urgent payment, or from Veterans Affairs as you're trying to progress an important claim through their channels. At its heart, this bill and indeed the Albanese Labor government's broader Australian public service reform agenda are about restoring public trust and faith in government and its institutions. We know that trust and faith has really, really plummeted, and some might even say it was at record lows. But it is vital to the health of democracy, to the operation of parliaments, to have a really strong and robust public service. And these reforms in this Public Service Amendment Bill of 2023 will help strengthen the Australian Public Service's core purpose and values. It'll help build the capability and the expertise again within the Australian Public Service and support good governance, accountability and transparency. And these are really critical, important pillars that underpin the Australian Public Service. If the public service is not about good governance, accountability and transparency, then we have a problem. And indeed, there is a problem we are trying to fix right now with this bill tonight. The Albanese Labor government understands acutely the importance of training and upskilling both the capacity of the Australian public service, but also ensuring that people feel motivated to stay in the sector. So we're not just having a churn through of public servants who are either burnt out because they're underworked and under-resourced, or they just feel like not valued. They don't feel that their work is held in high regard sometimes. So it's important that we turn that around right now. And as we understand, coming from Newcastle, and indeed any member coming from outside of a capital city, we understand the value of keeping jobs in regions. There are thousands of jobs in my electorate of Newcastle through the Australian Public Service. And as I said, it's not just capital cities that get to benefit. Every one of our cities, every one of our electorates has got deeply committed public servants operating and keeping the wheels churning in our communities. And that's why we are in Newcastle so excited to be launching a partnership with the University of Newcastle and the Australian Public Service to boost regional jobs and create really important digital opportunities. The University of Newcastle will be one of 4 locations around Australia to host an Australian Public Service Academy campus as part of the Australian Government's data and digital cadet programs. And Newcastle's campus location will provide opportunities for students to earn as they learn. And we all know that's an important matter for many, many students now. So they'll be able to work as an Australian Public Service employee while they are completing their bachelor degree program. And successful candidates will be offered a part-time role in the Australian Public Service while they study, with a remuneration package of up to $60,000 per annum plus 15.4% superannuation. So what a wonderful opportunity for young Novocastrians. No longer do you have to leave Newcastle to go and train to be a quality public servant. You can do that with this partnership now with the University of Newcastle. You can get great on-job experience whilst doing so, but also, importantly, be remunerated for that work experience. We're not asking people to be doing unpaid internships here, and these are important matters for any Labor government. We know that, like the private sector, the Australian Public Service is struggling to find enough people with those technical skills to fill the data and digital roles. And the Academy program, it's a significant partnership that will directly responding to the needs to address a national skills shortage while also keeping workers in the Australian Public Service. And it means that Newcastle locals wanting a career change, they can upskill in data and digital roles within the Australian Public Service at this academy, this campus at the university, on one of the Newcastle University campuses. It allows Novocastrians to stay in Newcastle while taking part in training opportunities. And it will attract aspiring public servants to get the right skills to have the very best chance at jobs in the Australian Public Service while continuing to contribute to the Newcastle community. So we'll be doing great things for young Novocastrians and not so young Novocastrians who are looking for job changes, but also attracting people to Newcastle from our region of the Hunter to ensure that they've got a great platform from which to be able to join the Australian Public Service and get skilled in some areas of great skill shortages for Australia. So in total, there are 300 flexible data and digital training and entry-level employment opportunities that are going to be offered across Darwin, Newcastle, Launceston and Townsville. Terrific opportunities for Australians. And some of the potential data and digital careers in the APS include data analysts and scientists, cyber security analysts, user researchers, software engineers, web developers, programmers and system designers. The Data Cadet program will be open to Australian citizens who have completed at least 1 year of a bachelor degree program and they have at least 1 year remaining in that course. While the Digital Cadet program will be open to Australian citizens who have completed at least 1 year of an ICT or technical bachelor degree and have at least 1 year of that program remaining. I know that the University of Newcastle is very keen to welcome the Minister when the cadet program does launch, and I too will be very excited to see that day. We all look forward to seeing how this program will be able to benefit workers, benefit the public sector and indeed benefit the region as a whole. It's good for government, good for good governance, it's great for regional economies and really good for young people looking for a secure, purposeful job, where they will be able to exercise influence and help shape, what this nation looks like going forward. The Public Service Amendment Bill that's before us this evening, it will strengthen the Australian Public Service's core purpose and values and build the capability and expertise of the APS, as I said, supporting good governance, accountability and transparency. Cannot stress how important all of those measures are. It's a bill that will add new a new Australian Public Service value of stewardship. It will require an Australian Public Service purpose statement, so nobody can be under any misapprehension as to what their purpose is in the Australian Public Service. It will make clear that ministers cannot direct agency heads on employment matters. It will encourage decision-making at the lowest appropriate level. And this is important in instilling skills and confidence in our younger emerging public servants. It'll make regular capability reviews a requirement. It'll require annual Australian Public Service employee census results to be published, along with an action plan responding to the results. So people will see their feedback being delivered and see what actions are being taken. And this bill will also establish at least one long-term insight briefing each year. Many of the proposed changes align with the recommendations from the 2019 review. So this is an important part of the Albanese Labor government's reform agenda for the Australian Public Service. There is still much work to be done, but I cannot stress how important these jobs are for regions like mine, and we will be doing absolutely everything we can to strengthen the APS and their capacity and capability in every town and city across Australia.